Hello, my name is David Adès. I'm a poet based in Sydney and the host of this monthly poetry podcast reading series called Poets Corner in association with WestWords in Parramatta in Sydney's West. WestWords is Western Sydney's literature development organisation. Poets Corner is part of WestWords' public programming that celebrates the richness, diversity and insight that literature offers. Especially in these times, we thank the ongoing support of Create New South Wales, the Cultural Fund of Copyright Australia, City of Parramatta Council, Blacktown City Council and Campbelltown City Council, as well as the many project partners that have enabled us to continue to provide opportunities to writers and audiences. We hope that this new world will see us sharing and a closeness of spirit. Each month I invite a poet to read poems and talk about them around a theme of the poet's choice. Our guest poet today is Natalie Damjanovich-Napoleon, who will be reading poems and talking with me on the theme of erasure poetry. But first, an acknowledgement of country. I'm recording this from Beecroft, Sydney. Natalie is recording from Walyalup, Fremantle in Western Australia. I would like to pay my respects to and acknowledge the elders, past, present and emerging of the Wallamita people, the traditional custodians of the land in Beecroft, and of the Whadjuk Noongar people, the traditional owners of the land from which Natalie is recording, and to acknowledge also that they are the sovereign owners of their land, which has never been ceded or given up. Natalie Damjanovich-Napoleon is from Walyalup, Fremantle, and spent over a decade living and working in the United States, where she gave birth to her son, inspiring her recent collection on motherhood in the wake of the first Trump presidency, If There Is a Butterfly That Drinks Tears, Gazebo, Life Before Man books. Her writing has appeared in Meanjin, Cordite, Hippocampus, Australian Book Review, and alongside the US Poet Laureate Ada Limon in the anthology Dear Human. She has won the Bruce Dawe and KSP Poetry Prizes and has been shortlisted for the Peter Porter Poetry Prize. She has also received a Red Room Poetry and Katharine Susannah Prichard Writers Centre Fellowship. Her debut poetry collection, First Blood, was released in 2019 with the title poem appearing in Red Room Poetry's In Your Hands. In 2024, she completed a creative writing PhD on erasure poetry and the forgotten histories of Croatian Australians. Through her work, she explores the construction and deconstruction of form, writing in erasure, free verse, and formal styles. Hi, Natalie, and welcome to Poets Corner.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. Would you believe that erasure poetry has never been discussed in any of the Poets Corner podcasts that we have done today?
That's awesome. We're breaking the seal.
We've done about 15. It's about time we got to this. Now, I know from a workshop that I went to last year that you are a practitioner of found poetry in a number of its forms, including erasure poetry. So before we talk specifically about erasure poetry, did you want to say something about found poetry generally and the role it plays in your poetics?
Oh gosh, I think I can trace it back to doing art in high school and doing art class in high school. I love collage and I loved found stuff. And we had a really great teacher and she covered kind of the history of, Western modern art and talked about the Dadaists. And I was always really enraptured by the Dadaists and what they were doing. And then when I went to do my PhD, I kind of traced back, and I think the Dadas were the first found poets. Tristan Zara, with his idea of pulling news lines from newspaper articles out of a hat and reading them in situ in the moment to create a poem in the moment. I love it because all the found work, because it shakes us all out of our tired old uses of language. We're all kind of going around in circles, right? Using the same language that it's based in our culture, where we grew up, our socioeconomic status and all of that. And I like that it pushes me out of all of that and it gets me to use words that I wouldn't normally use. And as you said in the intro, I'm interested in the construction and the deconstruction of form. And my obsession since I kind of, the process of doing my PhD and finishing it, my obsession now is the limits of language. What are the limits of language? How much can we push it? What can language do? What can't language do? I'm really obsessed with that as well. What language cannot do, what language cannot express. And to me, found work allows us to feed into all of that. I also love it because it means when I'm, going on a walk in my everyday life, and I created a poem a few years ago that got published in Unusual Work, where I was going on my daily walk, and there's all these signs on South Beach, walk your dog here, caution snakes, there are all these phrases. And I just got my phone out and I started photographing all the phrases I came across on my morning walk, got home, and I was like, I'm going to make a found poem, putting all these phrases together. And I put this found poem together from all the phrases I found in my morning walk. It's hilarious, it's incongruous, it's surrealistic. I think there's a line there about do not, and then it finishes with eat your dog, just kind of crazy stuff. It's just really fun. I like that, as I said, it keeps me aware in my everyday life. I'm just walking around or wandering the streets and I see a sign or, graffiti scribbled on the side of a building, and all of that can feed into my poetry. And that's what I love about found work.
So you did you start off with found work and then move to erasure poetry? What was the process?
No, I started off just writing, your regular free verse poetry. And as I said, that little seed that my art teacher planted with the cool work we did with collage and, looking at the Dawe artists and what they did, it kind of stayed in my mind. And then when I was working in the US, one of my workmates at the Writing Centre was enraptured with erasure poetry, and she was, erasing a book in the break room. And I just went, what is that? And she goes, oh, it's erasure poetry. And she showed me, and I read a few pages, and it was literally, this is Michelle Dettori. If anyone wants to explore her work, she's a wonderful poet. And I just fell in love with the form, and I just went off and explored it on my own. And then, it seemed kind of a logical progression for me to go from erasures to looking at, collaging words, cutting up lines and gluing them together to create poems. So yeah.
So how does it fit though in the sort of the overall context of your poetry? Is erasure poetry just another poetry technique or form for you, or does it have particular significance in your work?
Yeah, it's just another technique and form. There are particular reasons when I'll use erasure poetry. Number one, when I want to speak to power or speak to power structures or speak to kind of lexes, of language. Often it's in a satirical way. So, the poems that I'm going to read about motherhood is kind of having a go at a famous motherhood advice book. The poem that ended up in the collection with Ada Limon, again, was kind of analysing America's environmental policies and being very critical of them. So erasures, I think, are very powerful in they have two kind of threads. They have the socio-political thread, where you can take a text, you can analyse the language, you can erase out what you don't want to be heard, and it's almost like getting a highlighter pen and highlighting the racist language, the sexist language, the anti-environmental language, however you want to view a text. So you can use erasures that way, in a satirical, making a political commentary. Or you can kind of go like the Dadaists and go the absurd, surrealist, whimsical thread of erasures. One of my favorite erasure poets, Mary Ruefle, does that. Her stuff is really lovely and whimsical. She's got a book called, have I got it right here? I've got all my erasure poetry books on my desk. This is Mary Ruefle's A Little White Shadow. If anyone wants to read just a gorgeous, gorgeous little chapbook, grab this. It's, something written in the late 1800s, and she just took a really old text and erased it with whiteout. And again, it's just whimsical, it's fun, it's gorgeous. Yeah, and you can kind of do meta-textual things and comment on the writing process in those, or you can kind of go, surrealist and wacky and kind of do that thing, like I said, of pushing the limits of language, going outside the words you always use and putting, strange nouns and adjectives and nouns and verbs with each other. And, you create these kind of crazy narratives with erasures, which I find really fun as well. But yeah, as it kind of fits into my work, I still love creating free verse poetry too, because erasures are a restriction, and I'm not what's the word? I'm not a one-track mind, blinkers on my eyes, obsessive person. I'm a bit more of a I don't know, a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a bit of a, what's it, magpie that likes to kind of,
Bowerbird poet.
yeah, magpie or a bowerbird. That's, yeah, just picking little things to make my colourful nest of poetry.
Is there a protocol or convention that you must disclose the original text from which you have erased a poem into being?
It's not really a protocol, but it's you got to have copyright considerations. So I had a rude shock going from living in the United States for 12 years to coming back to Australia, because I came back 5 years ago, just before the pandemic, to do the PhD. And in the States, the copyright works whereby if you transform the text markedly from the original, it's okay and you can use it, and you can print that text, and you won't be under any copyright breaches. And then I got here and I started researching for my erasure poetry collection I was looking at doing. And Australia has very different laws. And yeah, you can't like erase any text and reproduce it and that be accepted as, now I, Natalie, have created these, this new text from all these words on a page, even if you radically transform it. So my erasure poetry collection that I did for my PhD, everything's out of copyright. So I've used Trove newspaper articles, checked all the regulations and everything. I think, can't remember the year, but it might be something like if it was published before 1958, it's out of copyright and I can use it. So that's why in my texts that are published, there's I haven't reproduced, the original text of what to expect when you're expecting. I've just put my own words on the page and kind of said after what to expect when you're expecting.
Yeah. I mean, I could imagine that if you use a text, say, like from the Bible, that most people will have read, it might even be better for it not to be disclosed where the text is from and allowing readers to identify the source text themselves. Is that something?
Yeah, if it's a really well-known text, I think you'd have to choose something that's really well-known, like the Bible. But I think part of the joy of erasures is disclosing the original text you've used, because with an erasure, you're having a conversation with the words that are on that page and that text. So if you take it out of context, but again, you can take it out of context again if you want to go for, again, the surrealist, whimsical kind of vibe. Sure, you could take a text out of context and do it that way. But yeah, I think it's always good to acknowledge the original writer, just for the fact that you're saying, I have borrowed from those words, even if I have transformed them and they're unrecognizable from the original text. I just think it's just a matter of respect and that whole kind of poetic lineage thing where we're paying homage to, whatever lineage we're having a conversation with.
And if they're alive, do you actually seek permission directly from the author?
I haven't, no, but there's an author I really like, Luis Alberto Urrea. And when I was in the US, I created some erasures because I created a little chapbook called Border Crossings, because there was a lot of rhetoric about the border and the wall at the time. And I created some gorgeous erasures of some of my favorites on Luis Alberto Urrea's from his text By the Lake of the Sleeping Children, I think it's called. and I shared them on Facebook and Instagram and tagged him, and he saw it and he just did a little like, you know, but again, in the US, that's acceptable. You can take another text and transform it. But yeah, he did see it.
That's interesting. I mean, I'd wonder whether you'd have conversations with some of the authors of the original texts about the work.
Yeah, you know what, David? It's an interesting idea you put out there. You know, that could be a future project for me to work with a fiction writer or a non-fiction writer, for them to send me some text. I erase them, send them back to them. Maybe they could respond to them in way they want to, that interests them. So yeah, it could be a really fun little collaboration to do something like that. Yeah.
Now you've mentioned, the kinds of things that inspire your erasure poems, those ones with the ironic content or the whimsy. But what is your actual process in writing them? How do you go about identifying a source text that you want to use for erasure poems, and how do you decide whether a particular poem would be suitable to be written as an erasure poem rather than some other kind of poem?
Oh, good thinking. I'm just going to close. I've got the door open behind me and I can hear the workman's radio. I'm just going to close it. It's better. They were driving me nuts. Okay, how do I choose a source text? Again, yeah, probably a couple of different ways. You know, I might stumble across something. I might be reading the Fremantle Herald or my local newspaper and go, "Ooh, I see an erasure in that." You know, just because I've spent almost the last decade of my life exploring the form. So you kind of I know this might sound weird to some people and it might make sense to other people. Sometimes it's like looking at the matrix, you know, how you have the letters coming down. It's like that for me. I can see a page of something and it'll be like, oh, I see a poem right there. But that's because I've been doing it for so long. So sometimes like the words just leap off out of an article or something off the page at me. I think that happened when I was reading what is her name? The Life of Objects. I've forgotten the author's name now. Susannah. Anyway, The Life of Objects. I was reading this beautiful fiction book, and again, words leapt off the page at me, and I created a few erasures from her book because I just love the language that she uses. And then other times it'll be deliberate. So I'll have a deliberate theme and a deliberate idea. So, for example, with the PhD, I wanted to exhume forgotten stories of Croatian people in Australia. So, I went to Trove, I researched, Croatian, Slav, Yugoslav, and then I started digging into all the racial insults, dago, ding, words that were used at the time. You wouldn't believe what I found typing in the racial insults. It was astounding. I couldn't believe newspapers printed those words so many times, and those deliberate searches resulted in me finding 200 or 300 newspaper articles, somewhere between 250 and 300. And I read every single one, and I deliberately, and I looked for ones that had interesting stories, and then I chose those to erase. So, stories like history, I again was just kind of scratched the surface of or was barely aware of, race riots in Kalgoorlie, where 3 men were murdered, and that was just such rich material and really difficult material to deal with. So yeah, so it will be, when I look at erasures, it'll either be again, like the found objects thing. I'm wandering through my everyday life, I see something leaps up at me, great, I can make an erasure from that. Or okay, I want to say something about this, and the poem that was shortlisted for the Peter Porter Immigration Triction was one where I really wanted to say something about the insidious white Australia policy. And people have kind of stopped talking a lot about Australia's really deeply racist past. And I think it's really good to analyze it and talk about how racism has evolved and which different groups it's been applied to over time and who's been considered outside the accepted members of society and who's considered accepted members of society and all these things. So yeah, so when I chose the White Australia policy, it was really, really deliberate choice. I had to go research the legislation. I loved seeing the original legislation in that old font. That's really great that the Australian government still has that on the website. I printed it off, and then the words leapt up at me as I looked at the legislation and tried to kind of create some commentary on it.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that later. I've got one more sort of preliminary question before I'll get you to read some poems, and that is, have you ever done an erasure poem from your own work?
Oh, yes, I have. I'm trying to remember now which one it was. Oh yeah, it's in my first poetry collection. It's in First Blood. I did. Yeah, that's right. I forgot I'd done that. Thanks for that question. Oh yeah, it was this one. Yeah. At a girl.
Yeah.
I erased my own work. That was really fun. I quite enjoyed it. Again, it's like making soup. You get a big pot of your own words, a bigger poem, and you just cook it and cook it and cook it down. Or sorry, more like a really good sauce. You get a big pot of all the ingredients and you
reduce it.
Cook this to, you reduce it down to this, and it's just full of flavor and taste, and that's kind of what happens when you take the erasure technique to your own work.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in that. I've thought about it. I've never done it, but I've thought about doing it. I thought when you sort of have been around for a long time and you have a body of work, it makes a little bit more sense. So you're going to kick off your reading today by reading a suite of erasure poems related to each month of the 9 months of pregnancy, and then we'll chat about them collectively.
When would you like me to start?
The first month.
All right. I bookmarked it because my publisher doesn't put page numbers on.
I noticed that.
The first month. And this is created from What to Expect When You're Expecting by Heidi E. Murkoff and Sharon Maisel. The first month. Welcome to your pregnancy. Maybe it's tender, but your body is making to be. You wouldn't expect around the bend the countdown to pinpoint precise days of however. The second month. Spill the beans, nagging nipples can't seem to deflate. You're a sea breeze virgin. It's a wild ride, a tadpole seed, the heart-shape fact, the first to be. The third month. Because you woke, you have the strength to lift it. Uncomfortable green olive kicks. Listen, thump, thump. The fourth month. Expectant cloud energy. Pick yourself up. Tender belly, clenched fist. The fifth month. Abstract chance, beginning. You will feel the serious belly reality. Though far from ready, arms know for sure. The sixth month. Doubt moves no wind. Little arms and legs become visible. Finish line, a light load with still feet. Kick up your senses a little. The seventh month. The biggest stretch. Load lugging labour. Baby REM, long, blinking repertoire. The eighth month. Approximately expectant trepidation, tapping into parenthood. Your half-gallon of milk agenda, busy speaking, little thumb. The ninth month. toes to sleep, last minute layette, the longest month, the longest measuring, life on the outside, umbilical suckle. Here's exciting news.
Right.
And then
Well,
we segue into the giving birth poem.
yes. I'm really interested in your choice of erasure poems for this subject. And I know erasure poetry, one of the functions of it is symbolic. Are you making the case that symbolically pregnancy can feel like an erasure of self, in that the self becomes a vessel for another and is therefore both more than and in some ways less than it was before?
Ooh, I didn't really think of that, but I love your analysis. That's fantastic. Yeah, I love it. Like, I mean, that's what I love about, writing poetry and putting it out into the world, that people can have their own analysis of that. I love that. It is true. There is a kind of an erasure of the self, and then you kind of have to rewrite yourself after giving birth and becoming a mum. And I know men go through the same experience. It's life before parent and life after becoming a parent. So
I think
yeah.
it's more visceral for women, I think. And
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, it's a bodily experience. It's inescapable that it is.
mm. You mentioned the source text for these poems, what to expect when you're expecting. Did that source text specifically go through each month of a pregnancy so that you had 9 specific subtexts that you could draw on to write the poems?
Yes, yes. Have I got a copy of it here? Hang on. Let me see. Did I keep it here? Oh yeah. Here it is. Here's it's nice that I'm up here at my desk and I can show you. Oh, this is fabulous. Okay, so here it is. There's the first month, right? And you've got a little illustration there, and see, this is my actual original erasure.
All right. Wow.
Yeah, and so they have a chapter on each one. So what this arose from is I'm a real advocate for empowering women in birth. And again, I totally accept, if anything happens and it's medically necessary, sure, have a cesarean and do all the interventions you need to. But, I really wanted to give a go of empowering myself and really being in control as much as I could, accepting, all the outside things that can happen in pregnancy and birth. So I went with midwives. And I had midwives in Santa Barbara, and I did this big reading on Ina May Gaskin, is the very famous midwife in America who in the 70s had a farm, and women would come there and she'd help them giving natural birth. And I just started reading Ina May, and I started, feeling really empowered and everything. And then someone in the US mentioned to me, oh, you got to get a copy of, what to expect when you're expecting. That's everyone follows that. So I grabbed a copy of it and I had it, and my midwife saw it and she goes, oh, you've got that patronizing book that treats women like children. And I was like, huh? Hang on. And then I went back and I started I only had it for 3 months, and I started rereading the sections, and I was like, oh my God, she's right. This is treating us like, this is infantile. It's treating us like children. And now your baby looks like a mango, and now it's the size of an olive. And I really, once I saw that, once the veil was lifted from my eyes, I couldn't look at what to expect when you're expecting seriously after that. So then I still read the next, 6 months of it and finished at the 9-month mark, because there is some good information in there. But the tone of the way it's written is just really oh, wow. Especially when you've read Ina May Gaskin and empowering women and treating you like a full, human being with your own thoughts and feelings and someone who knows what's happening with your own body. And so, it was a logical progression after that, when I had given birth and I had a bit of space and, started pulling together If There's a Butterfly That Drinks Tears, the poems that it just popped in my head one day. I was like, I could erase what to expect when you're expecting. And for me, like, I love your idea that, pregnancy and birth and that process is an erasure of the self. That's unreal. I love that. But when I started erasing the text, my thoughts were to show what an alien and strange and surreal experience being pregnant is. And I had a friend who's a scientist, and he's really fascinated by it. And he said to me, what's it really like? And I said, it is like what they say. There's an alien growing inside you, and you're like every day, what the heck is happening? This is so weird. And I thought I hadn't really read many things, again, all the stuff, no, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of the work in the past written about pregnancy and birth is very, oh la la la, what a lovely experience. And we've flicked, skipping through fields of daisies with the butterflies, and all that, kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I want to say this is as strange and surreal as you think it is, but also wonderful.
Yeah.
It kind of like, for me, it's like when I observe nature, it's strange, it's surreal, it's wacky, it blows my mind. At the same time, I'm filled with a sense of wonder for the process. And yeah, so two ideas were in mind, kind of really pulling apart the patronizing language of what to expect when you're expecting, and give some agency back to women.
Okay,
So
pretty strong stuff.
yeah, and then the second one was just to show how surreal the bodily experience is of being pregnant.
Being a host.
Yes.
Yeah.
For a growing alien creature in with alien DNA, right? Not your own. There's some alien DNA in your own body.
And they continue to be aliens after birth. But that's another story.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the first poem in the sequence, Natalie, because very often in your first month, you don't know you're pregnant. So is part of the rationale for writing this as an erasure poem that what is happening in a pregnancy is something that is forming itself, that is not yet formed or whole, that is in the process of coming into being?
Say that again.
I said, is part of the rationale for writing this as an erasure poem that what is happening in a pregnancy is something that is forming itself, that is not yet formed or whole, that is in the process of coming into being?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Again, there's this kind of, it's like a seed underground before it pops up through the soil. There's so much happening underneath you can't see or feel really early on, that yeah, it's kind of interesting to explore that germinal, strange little phase there. But yeah, I'm kind of maybe I did know straight away because of so many years of fertility treatment and everything. And so we knew trying, and yeah, so I actually did know immediately. So
Fair enough.
from, I know what day my son was conceived. Like, I was present from the very beginning, the very beginning. So yeah, not everyone has that experience. And again, what I would encourage, anyone listening to this who's been through pregnancy and childbirth is, I want to read and hear from more women and people with wombs writing about their experiences of pregnancy and childbirth, their, individual, unique experiences. I don't want to be reading like stuff like this that turns everything into kind of, what should be expected as one experience. And I think pregnancy and childbirth is just an absolute wealth of material. And yeah, I'd love to hear from someone who, a poem from someone who didn't discover they were pregnant till whatever, the 6-month mark or something. And yeah, it's fascinating and a deep topic to explore, to my mind.
I'm looking at the poems on a page in an erasure poem. It seems to me, in the context of pregnancy, to almost be referencing a group of cells floating within a little sea of amniotic fluid, that is occupying a small part of the space around it. Did
Sure.
you conceive of it like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. When I do create an erasure, there's definitely, when I'm looking at the page, I kind of like to spread the words out aesthetically as well. So as well as choosing particular words, if I need a 2, I might have a 2 over here on the page and a 2 here and a 2 there. and I'll choose the two that fits aesthetically nicer if I have the option with the words on the page. And when I reproduced these if there's a butterfly, Phil, the publisher who typeset it as well, who does like the fabulous Life Before Man books, he's an artist. And so he was happy to work with me and I wanted to replicate the spaces as I had them on the page of these original erasures as best I could.
Yeah,
And
I was going to ask you about that. How faithful the poems are to where the words appear in the original text.
They are almost 95 to 99% exactly the same. Yeah. And like, Phil and I talked about this. This is a really important thing to me. This poem here, and can you see where the words go beyond the gutter? So normally, the words will not go, you'll have a margin of gutter that ends sooner. And I said to Phil, no, because this is like pregnancy expanding outwards and pushing the boundaries and, the boundaries of who you are and your body and, everything are being stretched. So let's do the same thing with the words. And that was really, really just fabulous to work with someone who would indulge and understood what I was doing with the erasures visually, as well as, with the words on the page.
One aspect of all poetry is what is left unsaid. The room that poets give to readers to wander around a poem. Do you think that is particularly so of erasure poems like this?
Oh, absolutely. The space says as much as the words do in erasures. It really is. I love, when I read them, I always try and pause. Yeah, and I want it's kind of nice in today's world too, I think, to have, I don't know, space on a page. It's like saying as a reader, you can breathe. You can take your time with this. Yeah, but also it's also suggesting to the reader that they should think about the words that are not on the page as well. What's being unsaid, what's being untold.
I wonder how many readers would go back to your source text and try and compare the two, and be interesting.
I would love to know that. Yeah, that would, yeah. Like I said, for me, erasures are, almost always made in conversation with the original text. So, if you really want to understand what I'm doing, go back to the original text and read it. Yeah.
Are the words that remain on the page and that form the poem words that jump out at you when you read the source text, like you said that you sometimes that's like that, or is it a whole lot of trial and error to choose which words to leave in and which words to take out?
Oh yeah, there's, like any other poem, there's several drafts that happen. I did, when I first started making them, I'd just go in like with my white out or my art line blackout and just make them straight away. And then I learned that, I didn't like that line and I should have left the and or the two in there. And then I learned through doing that early on, I started a new technique. I would underline in pencil, or I'd photocopy the page, 3, 4, 5 times and just do, 5 different versions, work out what works best. And then for me, reading aloud is really important. So, and I did that with my PhD collection, the Commonwealth of Amnesia as well. Just read aloud, read aloud, read aloud. How does this work? How does the line work? How does the idea work? Could I add in another word? And with erasures, it tends to be you end up taking out more to get them to work.
I was really interested in the way that you read them, because you read them without pauses. And when I was trying to read them, I tried to imagine that there were pauses between the words because of all the space around them, but that's not how you read them.
Yeah, there's lines. There's bunches of words that work together as a line to my mind. But again, it's kind of fun to allow readers to discover, where the line breaks may be themselves.
Yeah. Now, I know that you run workshops, Natalie. Have you ever run a workshop where you have given all the participants the same text extract and asked them to write an erasure poem and seen how many different poems have emerged from the same text?
Yeah, I have. I did one for WA Poets when I first arrived back. They had me as a feature poet for the Perth Poetry Festival. And I have this really great text on Marco Polo's adventures. It's really great. The language in there is really rich and strange, and there's really interesting vocab in there. And so I photocopied 4 or 5 different pages from Marco Polo's adventures, also because it's out of copyright, which is great. And yeah, people created erasures from the same page. I think I did one as well. I've got it stuck up at my desk here. Yeah, it was fantastic. Everyone did something different. They read their poems aloud. It's just, again, it's such a thrill for me. It's just such a thrill. People will find a totally different narrative, totally different words, totally different lines to bring together. It's just great.
I mean, the possibilities are almost endless.
Well, they are. If you think about, I've said this before, when I'm writing, my cat just jumped on my lap. Say hi, Sylvia. When I'm writing, I do have all of us have a limited vocabulary, right? We have a box, a container of vocabulary that we use, what we've encountered in life, what we've read, what we're able to store in our brains. When you look at a page of text like The Adventures of Marco Polo, you've maybe got words that you've never used yourself before on a page, and it's just, it often sparks just something interesting to explore. And there's, I don't know, how many words are there on a page of text? There may be like 500 words on a page of text. That's quite a lot to work with.
Yeah.
When you think about it. So there's a lot of material on one page of text when you're creating an erasure from someone else's work.
I can just imagine, our viewers racing off to try this if they haven't already. You begin the second poem in this sequence with the words "spill the beans," which for me is invoking a telling, and yet the telling in erasure poems is minimalist, and as we've mentioned, leaves a lot out. Was there anything in particular that you were trying to convey in beginning that poem with these words?
Oh no, it's just kind of like maybe that by then you're pregnant by the 2nd month. So yeah, spill the beans, tell everyone.
Okay,
I thought that was really cool that phrase was there in what to expect when you're expecting. So yeah, it was just more that.
Well, it's important with any poem to get the first words right. Is that particularly hard to do with erasure poetry?
It can be tricky, but again, I would just say if people are going to explore the form, just don't overly focus on it. You have to be very, very open to be an erasure poet. Just you have to be open to possibility, and you have to be open to the possibility that you may not have a great first line, but there's going to be something better further on. Or, if you don't have a great first line, turn the page, try another page of text. Yeah. It's more the best metaphor I can come up with is it's more like a word search. We have word searches and you're looking for words on those grids. It's more like doing a word search than, looking at a blank page and trying to fill it with words yourself. So
yeah.
Whole different way of thinking, whole different way of using your the composing a poem part of your brain.
Did you write these poems whilst you were actually pregnant and experiencing the changes in your body, or was it sometime later?
No, it was sometime later. I had one of my greatest regrets is I wrote so very little when I was pregnant. It was just, I was so busy. It was a crazy time. I felt terrible for the first 3 months.
Yeah.
I felt like I had seasickness all day, 24/7. I was kind of like, I felt like I was, like this for the first 3 months of pregnancy. Yeah, and I wish
writing poetry, is it?
no, I wish I had. I think I am more of a poet who writes well in retrospect.
Yeah.
I need a bit of perspective.
Yeah.
I think from what I recall, my son was about 3 or 4 years old when I did the erasures. Yeah. But again, I kind of liked that I needed time to simmer on you know, the ideas and my changing identity and, you know, looking back on what pregnancy meant. I think that was a really fun way to create those poems.
Mm. Now I did a word count, and staggering really. The 9 poems range between 11 and 29 words in length. So they're really short. And your source text is over 600 pages.
Yeah.
So, you know, is looking for these words in such a long text like looking for a needle in a haystack?
Well, the limitation I gave myself was I created the poems from the first page of the chapter.
Right.
So that was easy. But like in other ones where I have used just like a whole book, like when I created a bunch of poems from the Life of Objects, I think it's Susan Orlean's, that book. I have to double check. We can look that up. But yeah, when I did that one, it was much trickier. I also did, what did I do? That was really fun. The Nino Colutta book, They're a Weird Mob. I created a whole bunch of poems from They're a Weird Mob for my PhD, and that was tricky. I had to flick through pages and find pages that worked. I think I created 40 or 50 pages from, you know, 220 pages of text. 40 or 50 pages of poetry. But yeah, that's tricky. You just have to keep flicking through until the matrix reveals itself and you can kind of find an interesting page that you think will make a good poem.
Are each of these 9 sort of monthly poems trying to home in on a singular aspect of the particular month of the pregnancy to which the poem relates, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a progression. You notice, like, you know, the last poem finishes with here's exciting news. So I just thought that was perfect, you know, because here's exciting news is the baby arriving. You know, the last poem, The Longest Month.
Yeah.
Anyone who's been pregnant or, you know, had a partner that's been pregnant can attest to how that just seems to go on forever, that last trimester and particularly the last month. So yeah, each one is, you know, I tried to kind of include something about what to expect when you're expecting, had about the measurements. So the eighth month, they told you your baby was as big as a half gallon of milk. Like the half gallon of milk agenda. You know, I didn't get to put it in all of them. There was, you know, there's the one about the green olive. So that's where they tell you your baby's the size of a green olive. And, you know, so yeah, I tried to kind of put some of those measurements in because some of those things are just so absurd. Oh yeah, the second month, a tadpole. They tell you baby looks like a tadpole. Yeah. It was fun. Really fun.
Yeah. Well, you gotta have fun when you write poetry. You got to play a bit.
Exactly.
In my reading these poems, I mentioned that when I read them, I paused a lot with the words. I looked at many of the words in isolation. You know, words like uncomfortable. It's, you know, a word like that, there's a whole story, and people would know, having witnessed pregnancies or experienced pregnancies, that there's a whole story behind that word uncomfortable, and the word tender and the word expectant. You know, the words that recur in the poems. Because the words of these erasure poems are clearly written in the context of pregnancy, do you think each word is invested with more meaning than usual because it sits on the page largely by itself, so that you could say that every word is like a prompt for a train of associations?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. That's what I love about erasures too, is they open up text for maybe greater interpretation. You know, that you read the line breaks differently than I did, you know. Yeah, but you know, less is more. You know, there's less words there, but you can really kind of hone in on what's there. You know, I just love just tiny little phrases that, again, I would never have thought of writing this myself. Umbilical suckle.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just great, that word umbilical and suckle next to each other. What else did I like? You know, oh yeah, I love this opening line on the 8th month, approximately expectant. You know, you're almost there. You know, I just love these. Yeah. And then there's that word trepidation on its own afterwards. You know, I read it as approximately expectant trepidation, but again, you could say approximately expectant trepidation.
Yeah.
You pause where you like, and it really draws out the meaning of those words.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a little bit about the relationship between the poem and the source text. I've read that, quote, erasure is a way to give an existing piece of writing a new set of meanings, questions, or suggestions. It lessens the trace of authorship, but also draws attention to the original text. What relationship did you want these poems on pregnancy to have to the source text?
Oh yeah, I want people to go back. Yeah, go back and read what to expect when you're expecting. Read my poem, see if you find it patronizing now, and is it really giving women agency and treating us like full human beings? I want people to question that and start looking at that. I mean, I've been following things like the inquiry, I think it was in New South Wales, to people who've had terrible birth experiences, and I've just read story after story after story where women were not given respect for their own bodies, for their own bodily agency. They had asked for certain things in birth and they had been taken away from them. And yeah, I want people to, these poems are a political statement as well. They are saying we are human and we have our own experiences of birth and pregnancy, and please respect that and respect us and respect our needs and what we ask for.
I mean, I know poems are for everyone, but are you saying that these are addressed specifically to pregnant women?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are. But like I said, one of the inspirations too was my male scientist friend who said, "What's it like? Is it really like having an alien grow inside you?" And I thought, oh, it'd be good to convey that to men as well, for them to have,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. It's not
have that.
something women would normally think about much, I would think.
Yeah.
Even though, well, I've mentioned each poem is of very few words, there are words that appear and reappear through the poems.
Mhm.
Belly, expectant, kicks, longest, arms, little. Did you deliberately search for such words to act as echoes through the poems, or did they repeat coincidentally?
Oh no, that would have been my subconscious. Yeah. Choosing those. Yeah. There's only so much you can think about when you're making poems, but I think that's nice that there's a pattern there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love how the sequence begins with the phrase "Welcome to your pregnancy"
Oh yeah, me
and
too.
and ends with "Here's exciting news."
Yeah.
Was that fortuitous that or
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, that was fortuitous, but I knew as a series that was perfect. Actually, I'll tell you, my greatest disappointment was with this series was that I couldn't get the whole series, the first to the 9th month, published anywhere.
together?
Yeah, together. I submitted these poems to a million different publications. They're probably the poems I had rejected the most. That really confounded me because I thought I was saying something interesting and really different. Yeah, so I wished they had been published elsewhere, but they're in my poetry book now. But I would have loved to have seen them in a journal together, and someone understanding that they're a series and the welcome to your pregnancy, and that it ends with here's exciting news. I
Did
was I thought that was just so lovely, and they were always meant to be read as a series.
did you ever get any feedback on why they were being rejected?
No, you rarely do when
I
you
know you
send
really
something
do,
up.
but I
It's
thought I'd ask.
so rare to get any feedback at all. In all the years I've been submitting, I think only twice have people written back to me with any real feedback, and over 10 years of submitting.
Used to happen more often than it does now, I have to say.
Yeah, people are just so time crunched, and I think more people are submitting now than ever.
Mm.
Mm.
The ending of the last one, here's exciting news, presages another beginning, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is that why you finished the sequence with a colon, or was the colon just in the source text?
Oh no, the colon's there to say, here's the birth poem follows, which is called the ripening.
All right.
Yeah, that's again deliberate. I could have taken it out. I took out a lot of other punctuation that was there originally, but yeah, I left that there.
All right. Shall we, reluctantly, but shall we move on to another poem?
Sure. When you told me this was going to go for 2 hours, I was like, what are we going to talk about?
Oh, yeah. No, I did my work.
Yeah.
So your next poem.
What's next one, David?
On day one, we will begin working.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this poem was created from, at the time, again, I was obsessed with borders and immigration and Trump's wall rhetoric. So the New York Times published a whole series collection of all the quotes that Donald Trump had said about the wall at the time. So it's created from Trump's Evolving Words on the Wall by Ron Nixon and Linda Huey. That was published in the New York Times. On day one, we will begin working. The wall is the wall, a real. Let's start again. The wall is the wall, a real wall. Build a wall, a great wall, big, beautiful doors, openings in that wall. A wall borders barriers, the wall. The southern border, lots of sun, lots of heat. The wall, a solar wall, a big, fat, beautiful door. The wall, a wall walls the wall. A wall, a great wall, a crummy wall, a wall, beautiful door. A wall, a fence, a wall, the great wall. The wall's a wall, any wall. On the fence, it's a wall. Build a fence, climb over. The wall will be beautiful.
Well, I know that as a poet, one of the things that I really want my poetry to do is to stay relevant. But
yeah, I kind of was hoping my poetry would become irrelevant and be
yeah, I was going to say there's some poems you
capturing
feel
a moment in time.
there's some poems you feel conflicted about, and you don't want them to stay relevant. But how do you feel about this poem now, Natalie? That he was, when he was talking about the wall, Donald Trump was front and center of mind, and here he is again, front and center of mind. There's no erasure of his looming presence on the stage, is there?
No. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm as confounded as anyone else, to be honest.
Well, having lived in the States for 12 years, you're less confounded than some of us. Talking about, the repetition of words in some of these poems, the word wall appears 29 times in this poem.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the wall was never really actually built, it embodies
Parts of it were.
Well, parts of it, not much of it. It embodies something to me that's very Trumpian. That is that if you repeat something often enough, you can almost will it to come to pass. Is this poem, as much as anything, a commentary on the forceful nature of Trump's persona?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'll have to go to start by discussing the technique I used to create the poem, because it speaks a lot to the words that ended up on the page. So I kind of developed this new technique, which is combining erasure and cut up collaging poetry. So what I did was, when I printed off the actual article with all the text of Trump quotes, and then I erased every line or word that did not relate to the wall, and I kind of left everything behind that I felt was talking specifically to the wall, because there was a lot of fluff in between, how he carries on, because the article is quite long. They had a lot of quotes. So I did that by hand, and then I went, and the second step was I cut each line of text into a strip, and then, like a jigsaw, I rearranged all the lines until they made some kind of comprehensible gobbledygook as a poem. And again, it was an experiment, right? Could have failed. I could have fallen flat on my face. But I just wanted to make a comment about, at the time, if you were living in the States, then, what you heard in Australia would have been 5% of what we were hearing. It was just everywhere. The wall, the wall, the wall, the wall. It was like the poem. So when
it was wall to wall wall.
Yeah. So when the poem came together the way it did, it was just, it's like when a jigsaw comes together. It's just like snap. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, and there was, again, because of the process I did, it definitely did highlight the repetition of wall and rhetoric. But the fun thing for me is, at one stage he was calling it a fence, and then he was saying there was going to be beautiful doors in it. I mean, this is for real. And he said it's going to be a great wall, like the wall in China. He said the wall would be beautiful. It's just fantastic. Yeah, there's just so much great material there. But again, deliberately, I loved that. I wouldn't have published this poem or printed it if it didn't say some things I'm interested in saying as a poet. And I loved that it said there's big, beautiful doors and openings in that wall. I wanted to say we can escape this rhetoric, or we can fight against it, or, we don't have to be drawn into it. And I thought that was beautiful as well, that I was able to find those words within his speeches too.
So when you're writing an erasure poem, are you always looking for a subtext beneath the text?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of the fun. Yeah, the fun thing about it, fun thing of the process.
Do you have a particular objective in using the technique of erasure when writing a poem with Donald Trump as its subject?
I don't want to get too political, but
Isn't every poem political?
yeah, look, the material is just so rich. What can I say? It's just so rich with his speech and the rambling and the repetition, and there's just some great material there for creating political commentary and satirical poetry and beautiful words from some ugly thoughts, let's say.
Yeah. Am I reading too much into this, or is this a commentary on Trump's propensity towards authoritarianism, which cultivates sycophancy and erases moderate and oppositional voices?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was pretty clear from the beginning of what I was doing. And like I said, this poem was a little offshoot of my border crossings project. It was the first erasure poetry thing I did. I just printed myself a chapbook, and I had used actually quite a few Obama articles on Obama and things Obama had said, and Trump was starting to say some things about the wall then. He was just the candidate at that time. So I had a few things from Trump in that border crossings. And then, like I said, I was just, as an immigrant and someone who, my nationality is spread over 3 different countries, Croatia, Australia, and America. I'm just fascinated with walls and borders and nationality and what it means to be this or that or another nationality or not another nationality. And again, who's accepted in the in crowd and who isn't. And yeah, that's what I wanted to look at in Trump's rhetoric and what he says, and through these series of poems.
Given the rambling discourses that Trump is prone to make, the very long rambling discourses, I imagine there would be ample source material from which to write a suite or even a book of erasure poems. Are you tempted?
There probably would be. I just have to decide whether I want to, throw myself into that. I created this really great love poem from the quotes that he'd said about grabbing women by the pussy. Excuse the language, but that's what he said. And I created this kind of really nice love poem from similar technique to the on day one we will begin working. I haven't got that one published yet, but again, I quite like that one. It's very different from the wall. It doesn't have that sarcastic, ironic tone. It's really a sincere love poem created from his horrible words.
I'm just going to say there's just so much source material,
There
and
is.
say it's rich. And I don't know if all of what he has said has been captured somewhere and that you could access it, but on such a large range of subjects
Yeah.
that are, I suppose, problematic. There would be enough material there, I'm sure. It'd be a hell of a lot of work, but it'd be enough material there to just keep going and going and going. But you'd have to immerse
Yes.
yourself in it, and that might just be a little bit too much.
Yeah, that was what I found by the time I finished my PhD. I actually I haven't spoken to many people about this, but anyone whose community has been through, anything difficult, and that's many communities in Australia. I actually had, I don't know, witness PTSD, reading about people being innocent civilians being interned in World War One, and race riots in Kalgoorlie where people's homes were burnt down and literally torn apart, like, in absolute like hatred, people ripping photos out of frames. That's not, that's absolute hatred and loathing just for somebody for being an immigrant other. And then following the race riots, there was a bombing in Kalgoorlie. Someone who was either mentally ill or had some political issues with Croatian and Slav people at the time planted a bomb under a boarding house and killed 14 men. So few people know about this event in Australian history, and it's very painful to read about things that where your community's been treated so badly, and xenophobia has been thrown at them, and you just think nobody knows about this. And when you think nobody knows about something, you feel like they don't care either. So it's difficult, very difficult work to put yourself in. And I have deliberately had a break and have been exploring some different topics since I finished the PhD, because I didn't realise how difficult it would be to deal with that kind of material.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've learned just doing this podcast series is that poetry explores a lot of dark places.
Mm,
I mean, there's room for lightness too. And, if you're a practitioner, you can't be in the dark place all the time. But
yeah,
yeah, and do you want to put yourself through that? But people do, because it's actually, and we've talked about it in some of the podcasts, it's actually a way to transform those experiences, and to rid them of perhaps some of their power over the people who've experienced them, by going in there and making poetry out of it. But yeah,
yeah.
I don't think I would be keen to write a suite of or a book of poems on Trump, but I just wondered.
So yeah, I may do it. Yeah, it's kind of easier to be a bit removed from it. It's not something terrible things that happen to my own community.
Mm,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the reason I did it was because I think these, the forgotten stories of Croatian Australians were worthy of being heard. Um, Hopefully they will be published one day. Publishers, hello, the work's available. Um, yeah, and it provided, after walking through the flame, it provided some sense of healing in the end. But I just didn't realize how difficult it would be to, I was reading the original newspaper articles about everything that had happened, a man who was shot when he tried to escape the internment camp because he got a letter from his wife saying that she had no money and her and the children were starving. And he just thought, I need to go home and help my family. So he started walking to the edge of the camp, just walking. The guards called him to stop and he didn't stop. So they just shot him, killed him.
mm.
It just tragedy after tragedy. And worse when it's just someone who's come to Australia to try and get some work and better their life and better the life of their family, and yet they were treated like aliens. They called them enemy aliens.
Mm. Were you born in Croatia, Natalie? What's
I
your
wasn't. No, my mum was born in Croatia and my dad was born here, but he went to school. My dad went to school at 6 years of age, not speaking a word of English. And he said he remembered his first day of school and he remembered looking up at the teacher thinking, what is this gobbledygook she's speaking? What's happening? he'd grown up in Australia and he didn't speak a word of English because the community stayed insular. And I always wondered why the community was so insular. Well, I guess if you go to live somewhere and people burn down your house and drive homes and drive you out of a town like Kalgoorlie, I guess you would remain insular after that.
So his family was Croatian, was it?
Yeah. My grandparents are Croatian on both sides of the family. So yeah.
All right. You mentioned earlier on immigration fiction. Would you like to read that?
Oh yeah. Hang on, I've got that one on my computer, so I've got to bring that one up. Immigration fiction. Here it is. Immigration fiction, an act to play king, Commonwealth, Australia. This act may be the act. This act means an act is a European opinion. A person of loathsome or dangerous character can pardon the prostitution of others to perform manual labour, a special skill in the trade ruling the Commonwealth. But the following are accepted: force, the form, land, sea, any public vessel, any port, a wife, children, writing under his hand. A person fails against this act.
You read that so much better than I did. I've got to say.
Like I said, I know where the line breaks are. It's kind of, yeah, they are made to be read aloud as well.
So I was a lawyer for 30 years and it never occurred to me during any of that time to use an act of legislation, act of parliament in poetry. I'm fascinated that you've done this as the source text for an erasure poem. And I find it odd in a sense. I mean, the language in acts of parliament, it's usually stiff, it's dry, it's formal. It's the complete opposite of the way in which poetry plays with language. So
yes.
What difficulties did you have in creating this erasure poem from the text of an act of parliament?
I don't think there's any way I could have created this poem if I hadn't read Travis McDonald's The Omission Repo. And the Omission Repo, Travis McDonald took the 9/11 Commission report, the whole 9/11 Commission report, and created a book of erasure poetry from that report. And in there, the word operation is repeated over and over. And he erases the word operation to create the word opera. And then in the last chapter, it's great. He progresses through using different erasure techniques, blackout, blurring, strike through, whiteout. And then the last chapter, he puts musical paper under the erasure, and he finishes with kind of using this metaphor of it being an opera. And it's just a wonderful book. If anyone wants to get a hold of it, it's just fabulous. Oh, look, I've got all my books here. This is it, The Omission Repo by Travis McDonald. It's just fabulous. Different techniques, right? Finishing with the musical paper. And so through him, I developed the technique of, okay, you can create interesting subjects or nouns from what's on the page. So with him creating opera, using opera instead of operation. And so then I thought, oh, well, I'll talk about, then all of a sudden, again, through a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of exploring of other erasure poets, I could use that metaphor of it being an act and a play, and the king's playing a role in this play, and the Commonwealth is a character in this play. Yeah, and the main actors of the play are the king and the Commonwealth, and the subjects have little voice in this.
Except for the mention of European.
Yeah.
European gets mentioned. And part of what you've done here, your play, is to create a new word. triction.
Yeah.
You remove the clamps, if you like, on the word restriction.
Mm.
Do you want triction to have a particular meaning, or are you just happy to let it sit there and people can infer whatever they want?
Oh, it's kind of like a word association game. And again, another, I think I developed this technique myself, but I can't say if I've ever seen anyone else do it. But it's like a wordplay game. It's like, oh, it's a trick. It's triction. It's not restriction, it's triction. And it just seemed really fun to me to do that. Again, working into playfulness. How can we play with language? How can we push the limits of language? So yeah, I definitely want people to kind of do a word association game with that. But for me, the word association game is, turning trick into a noun, triction, a different kind of noun, triction, so the word trick, triction together and do what you want with that.
So it's a triction fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. You kind of, like I said, yeah, erasure's a kind of like a bit of a word search and word play. And yeah, so this is something I developed myself, and I think it's again really fun and an interesting technique and an interesting way to play with language.
Mm. You make clear in the footnote the source text is an act of Parliament that enshrined into law what became known as the widest Australia policy, which subsisted for many years and was only fully abolished in 1973. Is the poem symbolic of the erasure of non-whites from the Australian polity whilst the act was in force?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But one thing I'm kind of disappointed with in the poem because the legislation was used to restrict numbers of Southern Europeans, because we were considered undesirable at the time and we were actually considered not European. So it is kind of it's disappointing to me that I could only find that language European in there, because there were, good Europeans and bad Europeans who were considered more like people of color. And the Italians had similar experience in America. It's been written about a fair bit, with Italians being treated as people of color for a fair amount of time in the US. So I find it fascinating how racial categories change, over time, and people are considered, in or out of a group. But yeah, it's undeniable that legislation was used to limit immigration of Asian peoples and Pacific Islanders. It was hideous. It was terrible. I'd love to see more people criticizing it and pulling it apart. And, I've read just some incredible stories about, interracial marriages and things like that, people who kind of tried to fight against the legislation. And yeah, there's more stories there to be told in regard to the White Australia policy. And I think it's a pity, again, that we haven't explored these dark spaces of Australian history. Yeah, so that legislation, and the way racial categories move is just fascinating. And so post World War II, all of a sudden, Southern Europeans were considered human and kind of acceptable to be part of white Australia, when pre-World War II they were not.
Yeah. And then it took a while longer for Asians to become acceptable again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there was, it's interesting how you posit it, because there was, of course, a lot of pushback against it, which is what led it ultimately to be revoked. But it was a process that took many years. And now I suppose it's viewed as a sort of historical thing, even though it probably still has repercussions flowing onto the present day. And it probably comes within the umbrella of that move throughout Australia, particularly with Indigenous peoples, of truth telling.
Yeah,
and poetry
absolutely.
poetry can do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth telling in erasure poetry work, and I think where it works best, like I said, is when it's making a really clear political statement and speaking truth to power, and acting as satire, or it's doing completely the opposite and being really playful and whimsical. I think they are its two main strengths. It doesn't really sit well in a kind of poetry middle ground. Yeah. It's got to be one or the other when you're working with erasures.
Mm. I was happy that you included the footnote to the poem, because I think without it I wouldn't have understood what you were trying to do. And if it were me, having never written an erasure poem really, I would have been attempted to retain some extra words to give more pointers to readers about the nature of the piece of legislation. How do you go about deciding which words to keep and which words to erase in a poem like this?
Oh my goodness. I did a whole bunch of drafts of that one. And again, it like started with more words. I don't know, there was 4 different drafts of that poem. And you got to realize when I'm doing this, I've got my I've got my white out here, and I'm like using my finger to wipe it across. Like my fingers end up being caked in liquid paper, and then I have to go downstairs and scrub them off later when I'm done. And it just, there's it. I like that it's physical work, that I'm touching a page. I did at the beginning of my PhD start with I had Adobe, and I got the redaction. I subscribed to Adobe and got the redaction level, because you can redact in Adobe.
Mm.
Know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. So I tried redacting on the screen, and it just was not satisfying for me. So
Your hands dirty, Natalie.
everything I worked on, I used my hands, and I don't know if there was something healing about that again in this process of dealing with all this kind of racial discrimination and violence and xenophobia. But yeah, it was, applying the white out to it was part of the process. And I guess what I'm trying to get across is it may look simple and easy, but I may have spent a whole day creating 4 or 5 different versions of that, 8 hours just sitting there, and then that doesn't include the time I spent searching for the legislation and then reading it before I started. And yeah, it's great work, but it what's it most akin to? Oh, this is a really good metaphor that I came across quite a few other erasure poets have used. It's really like being a sculptor.
Yeah.
So you start with a mass of text, a block of rock, and you're just chipping away at it and chipping away and getting your hands dirty while you're chipping away, trying to create something by taking away from it.
Yeah. I mean, you'll end up with not very many words on the page, but there's probably hundreds of decisions behind those words.
Oh, so many. Yeah, and like I said, when I started out creating erasures, I started with a few whimsical, I just found books in thrift stores and just erased them and had fun myself, just whimsical stuff, nothing political. But when I started like discovering a few erasure poets and seeing the possibilities of what could be done in regard to making political commentary, I was just, off and away. And there's just so much you can do, as I said, with being satirical, finding characters in a text, like, the king and the Commonwealth, the characters, saying that this was all an act and a play. As world's a stage, and all the people on it are the players. Yeah, so there's a little bit of Shakespeare connotation there, subtext. And yeah, but it's fun work, but it's a lot of trial and error, and there are a lot of poems I created that didn't work, that never made the PhD collection, or if there's a butterfly either. Yeah, you have to accept a lot of failure when you're doing erasures. You can't expect everyone you start is going to be successful.
Yeah.
Ever.
I spend a lot of time driving, and a lot of time whilst I'm driving listening to the parliamentary debates on Radio National. And it is theatre, it is play. There's a lot of acting going on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you've got one more poem for us.
Oh, yes. Oh, this one was so much fun. Okay. Oh, human. Oh, human. Oh, continue. O damage, O communities, O further, O prosperity. North, 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 northeast, Nino, northern. O cause, O American, O increasingly, O the growing, O reduce, O increasingly, wall, O occur, O cause, O the stress, O mismatches, O COB, nuisance, national, number, O interconnected, O arrange, O interconnected, O individual, O anticipate, O missed, number, no, no, knower, O increasingly, O result, O consider, O adapt, O build, number, nights, national, natural, national, O reduce, O lower, O not, O avoid, O the economy, O decision.
What a way to finish up a reading, Oh Human, as your last poem.
Yeah.
I just want to mention the footnote in to this poem refers to a tool called the deletionist.com. Can you say something about this tool and how you used it to create the poem?
Oh, I love the deletionist. So anyone who wants to discover it, yeah, just go to the deletionist.com. A bunch of folks got together and created this. It's not AI. And they created this program. Do not ask me how it works. I'm not a programmer or anything, but I love the tool. You go to a web page and you just hit the deletionist.com little tab that you add to your web browser, and it erases words on the page in different patterns. Sometimes it'll do the O thing, O reduce, O wonder. You know, sometimes it'll just choose letters that begin, words that begin with one letter, like N or M or S. Sometimes it'll do random deletions. I've noticed when I use it on different days, it does different things. It's just a wonderful, again, really playful tool that some wacky folks created to let poets like me make erasures from web pages.
Fair enough. So you've titled the poem Oh Human, and using the deletionist.com, you've got O's appearing in front of a lot of words, but not all of them. Is that to render the poem a lament at humanity's woeful inaction in substantively addressing climate change? Is that what it is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to all the result kind of again comes back to the technique where I use the technique of using the deletionist to erase pages. It was the fourth national, so the prompt for the poetry collection was you had to respond to the fourth national climate assessment in the US. So every poet responded to that in some way. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, yeah, great. I can use erasures. And then I looked at the report, and it's like 20 or 40 pages long. And I just thought, oh my gosh, how am I gonna, process this? And so then I tried the deletionist on it. And yeah, it created was there one report or two? I think there was two different reports. And with one report, it did O. And with another report, it kept all the words that started with N. And then I used my cut up technique, printed off the two versions, used my cut up technique, and again, jigsawed until I came up with something I was happy with. And again, I was just so happy with the ending. There's no way, right? O reduce, O lower, O not, O avoid, O the economy, O decision, right? And that's our the big sword hanging over humanity, is to make a decision about climate change and actually do something.
Which COP just failed to do, really, substantively.
Yeah.
Again.
So, and the fact that the collection ended up being called Dear Human and Oh Human, I think it was very serendipitous. It was just perfect.
So the O's were there and the N's were there, and that's just how it's emerged after you've used that program?
Yes, but again, my technique in all this was doing the jigsaw thing. And so, oh my gosh, again, I must have spent hours just rearranging words, reading them aloud, and it's trying to create some semblance of order from the chaos, which I really like as well with erasures. So hopefully I did that with this poem. But yeah, I kept reading it aloud until it made sense. And then when I found that last little section that had O decision in it, I was just like, oh, that's perfect. But NOAA is the National Oceanographic Organization of America, which is where one of my friends works studying whales. So, and they had done a big report on climate change and what it will do to the ocean. So I wanted to include NOOA in there, is what Americans call it. So
your use of the N and the O is that a sort of paradigm for no?
You could say that. I like that. It wasn't conscious on my part again, but I love it. I love it. It's awesome. Yeah, just again, this is, it's a serious topic, but it's quite a playful approach to it. And I like the O because it sounds like ancient poetry, right? Oh human, oh continue, oh damage. I mean, that was like a gift getting that.
You need an ancient mariner in there, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like what a gift that was as an opening line. And again, I think I used a deletionist over several days with that because it gave me a different erasure on the first 2 days. So yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of persistence with erasures, a lot of willing to fail before you find something that works.
And all the N words, north, northeast, Nino, I get.
Mm.
I wasn't too sure about where the others fit in, other than they were all starting with N.
Yeah, again, kind of a little bit of nonsense as well. I like nuisance national number.
Yeah.
And that can play at, people who deny climate change. They're saying your numbers are nuisance. Yeah, it's really fun stuff there that, you can read in a whole bunch of different ways. But yeah, and then number, no, again, denial.
Yeah.
Denial of what's happening. Yeah. But yeah, I loved what the deletionist ended up deleting. It just, yeah, and playing with the N words in between. I think it was nice because I liked the way national and number and natural came up as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you continuing to find different ways to write erasure poems?
I reckon the PhD and what I've developed myself, I think I've got a big tool belt full of tools now. But yeah, I'd like to see if I can develop some more tools along the way. But I reckon it's pretty rich so far what I've got. Yeah, I got tons to work with and tons of different tools and the cutting up and the deletionist and erasing words with liquid paper or blackout and yeah.
What would you say to someone, Natalie, who's never written an erasure poem? Where would they start?
I think the newspaper is a good place to start. You can explore a guy called Austin Kleon, Kleon. He created this fabulous book called Newspaper Blackout, and he's a graphic designer. And he created a whole bunch of erasure poems just reading his daily newspaper. Yeah, start with your daily newspaper and a blackout marker and just go along and, erase words until you find something that's interesting. The one proviso I'd give people wanting to start with erasures: do not summarize a text. You're not summarizing what's there. You're looking for something new. You're finding the poetry in the journalism. You're finding the poetry in Donald Trump's words. You're finding the poetry in, whatever, in what to expect when you're expecting. You're not summarizing what is there. And that's the big trap when people start doing erasures. And less is more.
Okay. And are there any rules? You just make it up as you go along.
Just make it up as you go along. I mean, I work, actually interesting that you should ask that. I work inline. I just work left to right in text. But if you look up someone like Austin Kleon, he's got a great website, and he's got lots of his erasures up on his website. So that's why I said he's a great place to start. And Austin will like circle one word and go to another word and circle it, and then circle a word above, so you know those three words kind of go together to be read as a line, so you can work out of line. And a lot of visual erasure poets do that. I don't find that technique works as well for me. Just find it's a bit trickier for me. But I think people who are really good artists, and again, they can think outside the box a bit more than I can. You know, you can use words out of line from different areas on a page, and that's another really fun technique.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about erasure poems, Natalie? We've covered a bit.
Just explore it. Just love it, everyone. And don't assume that's because something's, kind of like haiku, because something's shorter. Don't assume there's not a lot of craft behind it. There's an incredible amount of craft behind it. And most people discover that when they try to create an erasure poem themselves. It's it's not as easy as it looks, but I just say, if you want to explore the form, just get going, get into Austin Kleon, have a look at some of whole bunch of my poems are online. I think Cordite's published about 3 of my erasures now. You can have a look at what I've done there. There's some really playful stuff, and just start exploring. Get some books out of thrift stores or your local newspaper, and then start exploring and start creating erasures.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Natalie, for sharing your poems and exploring your experiences, thoughts, and insights on erasure poetry. It's been wonderful. Details of Natalie's books and where to get them will be posted with this podcast, so please look out for them. We'll be recording one more Poets Corner in 2024. Not that anyone will see it until way into 2020 to 25, because we're a bit late in getting them out there, but that'll be March Dinick on the 6 gifts. And then Poets Corner will be back in 2025 with another lineup of wonderful Australian poets. See you then.